Hey guys, a few days ago I opened up a poll on the channel with a few options on what our next video should be, and you voted for this topic, and I'm actually glad this was the first option. The Wano arc is finally ending now in the anime, so this is a perfect opportunity to look back on Kaido and Big Mom and how they were handled by Oda. With the end of Wano, we pretty much finalize an era in One Piece that represented the victory of the new generation, supernovas like Luffy, Zoro, Law, and Kid against the old generation, represented by the emperors Kaido and Big Mom. This moment in the story was highly anticipated, and it represented a huge shift in the forces that governed the One Piece world when a new set of emperors was defined and our main character awakened his devil fruit, being finally prepared for the endgame and final events. The build-up for the confrontation with Kaido and Big Mom was heavily teased and foreshadowed and spanned several arcs, starting with Luffy declaring himself as an enemy of Big Mom in chapter 651 during Fishman Island until the end of Wano in chapter 1057. So it definitely represents a huge chunk of the story and definitely demanded particular care from Oda in the writing. With that said, I have some problems with the way this part of the story was handled, and these two emperors of the sea were treated as characters and threats. There are some strengths to Kaido and Big Mom which I will be sure to mention, but there's also a lot that could have been done better. In this video essay, I'm going to delve deep into why the emperors are so important to the story. What exactly makes a good antagonist, and how do Big Mom and Kaido fail and succeed in this regard, and why ultimately the way they were handled in the story is a bit disappointing. This is Supernova, your fantasy and sci-fi cosmic explosion, and this is how One Piece failed the Emperors of the Sea. Let's get to it. So for starters, it is important to mention that the Emperors were always part of the plan for One Piece. Oda initially planned for the manga to run for around 5 years. His original vision was a story with a much shorter timeline and a more compact narrative that basically involved Luffy defeating the Emperors throughout the story and eventually finding the One Piece and becoming Pirate King. However, due to the immense success of the series and the overwhelming popularity it gained over time, Oda expanded the storyline significantly. The world building, character depth, and the complexity of the overarching plot expanded beyond his initial expectations. As a result, One Piece has continued far beyond its original planned duration, evolving into a much larger and richer narrative universe, which we're definitely happy about. This information is important because, as I mentioned before on this channel, not everything needs to be planned out in detail, especially in a serialized piece of fiction that spanned the course of 20 years. There should be room for the characters to live organically in the world and shape events based on how the narrative evolves. When it comes to the Emperors, however, they won a plot point from very early stages of the story, so it is particularly surprising how some aspects of them were mishandled. But in order to understand where Kaido and Big Mom fell short, we first need to understand what makes the antagonist role they fill in the story good and compelling. In general, different antagonists may have different roles in different stories, but some 3 important characteristics need to be fulfilled. If one of them is not, then the author probably needs to go ham on the other 2 in order to sell a good villain. Let's go over each of them one by one. The first one should be complex motivations. A compelling antagonist typically has multifaceted motives that make their actions understandable, if not justifiable, although being justifiable is not necessarily a requisite. Their backstory, desires, or experiences add depth, allowing audiences to empathize, or at least comprehend their perspective. This complexity makes them more than a mere obstacle for the protagonist, giving depth to their actions and decisions. If a backstory is not given, their actions can be contextualized through current events. But the most important thing is, you need to at least understand where they come from, even if you don't agree with their thought process, because that ultimately avoids the mustache-twirling villain syndrome pitfall. Aokiji embodies this first trait well. His motivations are layered and set him apart from conventional antagonists. Initially introduced as an admiral in the Marines, he is depicted as more of an enigma, not fitting the typical mold of a straightforward antagonist. While he serves as an antagonist due to his allegiance to the world government, his actions and beliefs often challenge the typical black and white portrayal of good and evil in the series. Aokiji displays a sense of justice that doesn't always align with the absolute stance of the world government. His decision-making is driven by his interpretation of justice which sometimes contradicts the orders he's given. Despite his allegiance to the Marines, he demonstrates a willingness to follow his own moral compass, making him an unpredictable figure. Aokiji displays a sense of justice that doesn't always align with the absolute stance of the world government. His decision-making is driven by his interpretation of justice, which sometimes contradicts the orders he's given. Despite his allegiance to the Marines, he demonstrates a willingness to follow his own moral compass, making him an unpredictable figure. His complex motivations are highlighted when he engages in a 10-day battle with Admiral Akainu, showcasing a fundamental disagreement over the direction of the Marines. Aokiji ultimately leaves the Marines and joins the Blackbeard pirates after this conflict, suggesting a deeper divergence in ideologies. His subsequent actions and intentions remain ambiguous, contributing to the complexity and intrigue surrounding his character. We are not offered a backstory to his character, so putting together the puzzle of who he is and why does he act the way he acts definitely adds intrigue, especially because he is so non-conventional with his motivations. The second characteristic is depth and development. Antagonists benefit from a story arc or development that reveals different layers to their character. As the narrative progresses, the audience learns more about their past, their struggles, or the reasons behind their actions. This development humanizes them, making them more engaging and sometimes even relatable. Law is a good example of this one. Initially introduced as an antagonist with mysterious motives, his character evolves significantly. His backstory, connections to the infamous Doflamingo, and his alliance with Luffy showcase his depth. As his past is unveiled and his goals clarified, Law's development from a seemingly antagonistic figure to an ally with intricate motivations demonstrates his complexity. Another good example of this is Kuma. Initially introduced as one of the 7 warlords of the sea, he undergoes a significant transformation throughout the series. While initially portrayed as an antagonist aligned with the world government, responsible for challenges and suffering for the Straw Hats, Kuma's character development takes an unexpected turn. His backstory and interactions with the Revolutionary Army unveil a deeper layer of his motivations. Kuma's journey evolves when he undergoes a transformation into a pacifista, seemingly under the world government's control. However, it's revealed that Kuma made a pact to protect the Thousand Sunny and the Straw Hat Pirates, showcasing a more intricate and selfless aspect of his character. Kuma's evolution from a feared warlord to a self-sacrificing figure bound by duty and honor, heavily highlighted during Egghead, adds depth to his character and brings him to basically a martyr status. His actions challenge the perceptions of good and evil in the series, presenting a complex individual with conflicting loyalties and a deeper sense of purpose. The third characteristic that makes a good villain is their ability to generate conflict and act as a foil for the protagonist. A strong antagonist not only challenges the protagonist, but also the themes and ideas presented in the story. Their actions and beliefs create substantial conflict, forcing the protagonist to grow or adapt. Moreover, the antagonist's impact extends beyond their direct interactions with the hero, affecting other characters and the overall narrative in significant ways. Katakuri acts as a compelling foil to Luffy due to their shared abilities and the contrast in their personalities. Both possess similar devil fruit abilities, and their combat styles are reflective. Yet Katakuri's mastery and honed abilities surpass Luffy's, creating an intriguing dynamic. Katakuri is meticulous and deliberate, mirroring Luffy's moves but with a level of precision and foresight that Luffy initially struggles to match. This mirrors their differing approaches to life. Luffy's carefree, unyielding nature versus Katakuri's composed, disciplined demeanor. Their clash not only highlights their physical abilities, but also delves into their ideologies. Katakuri's initial desire to maintain a perfect image and hide his vulnerabilities contrasts sharply with Luffy's transparent and straightforward nature. Over time, as Luffy learns more about Katakuri's true self, it forces both characters to confront their beliefs and values, leading to mutual respect despite being adversaries. The mirrored abilities in the fight in the mirror world serve as metaphors for their similarities and differences, allowing their interactions to explore deeper themes of personal growth, determination, and acceptance, making Katakuri an exceptional foil to Luffy. We can look through the prism of this framework and analyze every antagonist in the story. what we can quickly realize is that most of them don't fulfill all of these three important traits, but that's not really a problem, as long as they serve their purpose well. I do, however, feel like the Emperor should fulfill this framework to a T because of how important and monumental they should feel to the story, and they fail at that. And I don't believe it is because of Oda's writing ability. He was able to achieve a perfect antagonist that fulfilled all of these three character traits in Doflamingo. Doflamingo is widely accepted as an awesome villain by the fandom, and as I mentioned, I believe this is due to the fact that he fulfills really well these three antagonist requirements. Firstly, his complex motivations are rooted in a traumatic past. His noble heritage turned nightmarish when his family lost their status and were ousted to the common world. This history twisted his perception, fueling a belief in his superiority and justifying his heinous actions. His desire for control and dominance is deeply ingrained, making his ruthless methods strangely understandable given his past. This is a perfect example of how to make your antagonist's thought process contextualized and understandable without having the reader agree to it. We get how Doflamingo became what he became, but we still hate him for it. Secondly, Doflamingo's depth and development are evident through his layered characterization. As the story unfolds, his backstory gradually unravels, revealing the layers of trauma and manipulation that shaped him. The intricate way Oda reveals his past humanizes him, bringing nuance to his character and offering insight into his actions. His evolution from a victimized child to a manipulative and calculating antagonist showcases a dynamic character arc. Lastly, his impact and the conflicts he brings to the story are monumental. His control over Dressrosa, his status as a warlord, and his involvement in the underground world create challenges that extend far beyond Luffy's quest. His clash with Luffy becomes a focal point, not just testing their strengths, but challenging ideologies and morals. The consequences of their conflict echo across the Straw Hat crew, Dressrosa's citizens, and the entire world, making Doflamingo's role in the narrative pivotal. Doflamingo serves as a formidable foil to Luffy across multiple facets. Their opposition isn't just physical, but extends to their core ideologies and methods. Doflamingo's rule by fear and manipulation sharply contrasts Luffy's emphasis on camaraderie and freedom. Their leadership styles and moral compasses stand at opposite ends, with Doflamingo's pursuit of control clashing against Luffy's fight for justice and protection of others. Even in combat, their divergent approaches, strategies, and motivations become apparent, shaping their battles into symbolic clashes of ideals. Their conflict highlights the stark differences in their impact on the world. Doflamingo's actions breed chaos and suffering, while Luffy's inspire hope and positive change. Doflamingo's complex motives, fueled by his past, make his character multifaceted, emphasizing the depth and development typical of a compelling antagonist. Their contrasting roles not only challenge each other, but also emphasize Luffy's growth and the underlying themes of the narrative. So now that we established that Oda is perfectly capable and talented enough to write a perfect antagonist, why couldn't he hit the nail on the head with Big Mom and Kaido? When it comes to making them really well-rounded and compelling and their arcs in the story satisfying. I do believe that the decrease in editing quality for the story is a big factor. Oda got overly ambitious with his later arcs, trying to juggle too many ideas at once to the point where he failed to nail the essential story aspects that would elevate this section of the story, namely writing satisfying villains and villain arcs for their main antagonists. With Big Mom, while she has compelling aspects, she falls short in a few key areas as an antagonist. Firstly, her complexity and motivation sometimes gets overshadowed by her immediate desires and outbursts, as seen as how the final confrontation in Whole Cake Island was reduced to Big Mom becoming a kaiju cake-obsessed monster. This inconsistency can blur the lines of her character, making her less relatable and occasionally reducing her to a more caricatured version of her multifaceted self. Additionally, her depth and development, while present, might not feel as pronounced due to the intermittent focus on her sudden mood shifts and whimsical behavior. The development of her character sometimes lacks the consistent exploration necessary to fully flesh out her complexities, leaving gaps in her narrative arc. Moreover, although Big Mom's conflicts and actions challenge Luffy and his crew, their impact tends to be more contained within immediate confrontations rather than deeply affecting the broader thematic elements of the One Piece world. This somewhat limits her as an antagonist, as her influence doesn't extend as profoundly into the larger narrative compared to some other adversaries in the series. There is also a lack of nuanced exploration or direct clash of ideologies between the two characters to make Big Mom act as a foil for the Straw Hats. I do think there's some room for exploration of the concept of family in the whole Cake Island arc. Big Mom's understanding of family as an entity she can control, abuse and torture for her own selfish gain should contrast Luffy's idea of what his chosen family represent. The seeds for this exploration are planted in the story, but Oda throws it all out to focus on the next shiny thing, which makes the conclusion of this arc feel a bit unfinished. This lack of strong ideological conflict between Big Mom and Luffy diminishes the potential for a robust foil relationship between the two characters. Wano also didn't contribute a lot to Big Mom's story. She became even more of a caricature and plot device here than she was before, and she was even nerfed to cater to Kid and Law. In terms of depth, while she has a rich and complicated history, I found that her character lacks the depth and development expected of a major antagonist. Her past and motivations, though intriguing, haven't been explored extensively, leaving certain aspects of her character less fleshed out. I find it challenging to see Big Mom as a fully fleshed out antagonist due to the limited exploration of her emotions beyond her hunger pains or rage. Even if her motivations are explored in the future, with a Rocks Pirates flashback for example, I feel like the timing to establish her personality should have been before her defeat in order to maximize narrative impact. At times, Big Mom's character veers between moments of terrifying strength and comical eccentricity, leading to inconsistencies in her portrayal. This inconsistency might detract from her impact as a consistent and formidable antagonist. In Wano, Big Mom's potential as a powerful antagonist feels underutilized or overshadowed by other narrative elements. Her presence, especially in some instances, might not live up to the level of menace expected from a Yonko. So overall for Big Mom, I feel she doesn't fit completely any categories of the antagonist framework at all, which is a pity for a villain that should be so important and impactful. Kaido as an antagonist faces similar challenges. While having intriguing motives linked to his quest for an honorable death and the creation of a world of constant war, his complex motivations sometimes get overshadowed by his reputation as an overwhelmingly dominant force and his pursuit of strength at any cost. And these broad strokes aren't explored as well as they should, since the arc structure just falls back again to the old faithful. This island is being ruled by a tyrant, but don't you worry, the Straw Hats are going to save the day. I think it would be interesting if Oda leaning a little bit further onto the idea of Kaido knowing that him and Joy Boy were destined to meet, which is why he tried to get the attention of him by enslaving a large country. This would be such a fascinating angle for his character, to finally meet his glorious demise at the hands of this mythological deity representing freedom. There were hints of this interpretation in the story, but I think it could have been more fleshed out. His depth and development, though hinted at, haven't been extensively explored yet, leaving some gaps in his character arc. While there have been glimpses into his backstory and mindset, a deeper dive into his past and personal struggles could provide more nuance to his character. And as mentioned for Big Mom, even if we get more from Kaido's past in the future, the timing to establish these characters' aspect is already gone. Moreover, while Kaido's clashes with Luffy and the Straw Hat crew have immense immediate impact, they sometimes lack a deeper resonance within the broader narrative of One Piece. His influence seems more localized to the specific confrontations rather than profoundly affecting the larger themes and world-building aspects of the series, which might limit his role as a truly impactful antagonist in the grander scheme of the story. One common criticism about Kaido as an antagonist is related to the ambiguity of his goals and motivations. Unlike some other well-established antagonists in the series, Kaido's objectives and reasons for pursuing them remain somewhat enigmatic. This lack of clear motivation can make it challenging for the audience to fully engage with his character on an emotional or intellectual level. Another criticism revolves around the pacing of Kaido's arc, particularly Wano. It feels both incredibly slow, due to the amount of time spent with random characters that probably won't have that much of an impact on the endgame, and also too fast and truncated at the end for speeding through some important character building moments for Kaido, for example. Additionally, I could also note that Kaido's overwhelming physical strength and seemingly invincible nature might contribute to a perceived lack of vulnerability or depth in his character. A well-rounded antagonist often has both physical and emotional vulnerabilities that add complexity to their personality. It is totally okay to establish an all-powerful villain, but these character traits could also be given some depth, which wasn't the case here. With Kaido, there are also perceived inconsistencies, particularly in his portrayal regarding his near invulnerability and his mental state. Initially presented as seemingly invincible due to his endurance and ability to survive numerous execution attempts, I find it inconsistent that he doesn't use this invincibility more strategically in battle or situations of conflict. It's a similar situation with Big Mom. They are all powerful until it is convenient for the plot for them to forget some of their abilities in combat. Additionally, Kaido's mental state, particularly his desire for death, has been portrayed in a conflicting manner. This is such an interesting angle for an almighty character, but once again, the seeds planted here were completely forgotten because it felt like Oda just wanted to move on to the next shiny thing. At times, his longing for a grand demise appears as a central aspect of his character, while in other instances, his actions depict a more straightforward desire for domination and control, creating confusion about his true motivations and goals. It is a bit hard to reconcile this inconsistency in his emotional portrayal. In conclusion, Big Mom and Kaido reveal both their strengths and shortcomings in fulfilling the pivotal roles of compelling adversaries. While the series has successfully crafted multifaceted antagonists like Doflamingo, Kuma, and Aokiji, the narrative surrounding the Yonko, specifically Big Mom and Kaido, has faced challenges in meeting the expectations set by earlier antagonists. Their portrayal reflects the difficulty of balancing multifaceted motivations, depth, and impactful conflicts within a sprawling narrative as one piece. Despite their shortcomings, the series struggles in defining these two powerful figures as fully realized antagonists, indicate the immense narrative complexity Oda navigates, due to his own choices and perhaps lack of editing in these later arcs. The evolving nature of One Piece's narrative, initially projected for a shorter run, expanded far beyond its original scope, which might have contributed to the challenges in fully fleshing out these major adversaries. Nonetheless, this examination highlights the significant impact well-crafted antagonists have on shaping the storyline, challenging the protagonists, and propelling the narrative forward. Ultimately, while Big Mom and Kaido may not completely fulfill the criteria of ideal antagonists set forth by their predecessors, their role in One Piece remains significant. Their arcs, though criticized for certain inconsistencies and lack of depth, remain integral to the series' progression, illustrating the complexities inherent in crafting multifaceted antagonists within a long-running and intricate narrative like One Piece. We still expect some big confrontation and the conclusion of antagonist arcs for characters such as Blackbeard and Akainu, and if Oda nails their portrayal and wraps up their stories well at the end, One Piece may still be able to finish its story on a high note when it comes to handling their villains. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this content and want to support this channel, the best way to do it is to engage through subscribing, liking the video, and leaving a comment. I really appreciate it.